You're listening to Creative Campfire, where creatives like you come to talk shop, share stories, and light the path for one another. Whether you're here to learn, grow, or just feel a little less alone, welcome to the fire. Today's episode is a special one. I'm joined by Xanthe Appleyard of Sierra, a creative leader, community builder, and someone I've long admired for the way she blends intentionality, action, and a sense of leisure into how she works and leads. If you follow her online or listen to her podcast, Love You to the Core, which she co-hosts with her husband Frank, you know she's not afraid to build in public, share the messy middle, and reflect honestly on what it means to run a values-led business. In our conversation, we dive into her money mindset journey from growing up around narratives of lack and the belief that being an artist just doesn't pay, to college-era spending sprees, to now where she's built a business that gives her the flexibility and autonomy her agency life just didn't. This one's for anyone who's ever wrestled with living in overdraft, being a sole breadwinner, or redefining what a rich life means, and how to build a life that feels good now, not just someday. It's time to spark this conversation. Hey, Xanthe, how's it going?
Oh my gosh, it's going so good. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited for you to be here too. Why don't you give us a little mini bio of who you are, where you're at, and what you do?
A mini bio. I know this is always the trickiest for me, so I'm going to try and summarize it. I feel like every time I do a podcast interview, I change something ever so slightly, but I think that's very accurate to my life, which is ever changing, right? I feel like there's a lot of evolution always happening. So I'm an online leadership expert. Like that's pretty much the easy way of putting it. But I support folks through the lens of content strategy. I support folks through the lens of marketing strategy and also business strategy, but specifically for folks who run online businesses. So very much in the business of online leadership through the lens of social media, but then also a lot of community building as well as even, kind of bridging into sales, offer development, and that kind of thing. And I really focus on and love to work and support with folks who are excited to use their content as an expression of creativity, use their content as a way to sort of shape their industry and create these new and more not necessarily more interesting dialogue, but almost dialogue that challenges the status quo, dialogue that is maybe not what we've heard traditionally and gives them the opportunity to have a major impact on their industry, but through the way that they actually show up on the internet. And so that's a summary of business side of things. In terms of human side of things, I'm a co-founder of this business we call Sierra, and it is ultimately a coaching and education and strategy business. But me and my husband Frank own it together. We also invest in properties. We also travel the world. We've relocated to multiple countries, and I'm kind of in my mid-30s, and I feel like I'm just getting started. So that's where I'm at.
You're also a dog mom.
I am a dog mom. In fact, as we are recording this, I have a dog sitting on my lap in my sweater. So he's here with us.
Yeah. I saw him crawl on you. I was like, oh, there's the pup.
He's always here.
Well, I love having you here. For those that are listening, we met 5-6 years ago, right before the pandemic hit. And you were doing something slightly different than what you're doing today.
I was, yes. So at that time, okay, so this is January, I think it was actually February 2020. Such a wild story. We had been living in Canada at the time. We had driven down to Palm Springs for the summit, and then we had stayed in LA for about a month. And then we had actually at the time that, borders were closing due to the pandemic, they were like, come home. We were like, oh, we got to drive back to Canada. So that was such a wild experience. But at that time, yeah, me and my husband were running a creative agency together. So more focused on design, photography, social media management, still very much in the marketing world, but we were taking on a lot of design work, branding, websites, that kind of thing too. And at that time, me and my husband were both more involved. Now the business is more centered around me and my leadership, but at the time we were both quite involved with client work. We were building a team, which we actually did end up sort of scaling into more of an agency model for several years. And so, yeah, things are looking quite different. And then the world completely changed. And so here we are now.
And then we evolved too.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that context for people to realize that there's been multiple iterations of what you and your husband have done professionally outside of ruling the world and checking off countries that you want to visit. Um, this leads into like our bigger conversation around money, right? And
Hmm.
so I want people to understand that like you've been an entrepreneur for a really long time and you've seen
Hmm.
different iterations of that from a business standpoint. But before we get into the adulting part of the conversation, I want to rewind back to like childhood era of
Yeah.
like where did some of your money beliefs maybe start, right? And typically that starts with your upbringing. So I'm curious, like, what was instilled in you as a kid, if anything?
Yeah, super, super interesting to think back to that. So I was raised by a single mom. She was very young when she had me. She was still in university, so she was still in college. And her family was quite generous with us. Like not necessarily well off, but we always felt very secure because they were helping us out with the rent, for example, of our house when I was like a baby. But at the same time, like my mom was trying to make it on her own. She was a student. She was taking welfare. Like she was, kind of living within. I mean, she was always very much like living within her means because she didn't really have another choice. So I was able to see a lot of what I see now as like financial responsibility, but at the same time, it was within a limitation, right? Within pretty significant limitation. And so growing up, I was able to I had a really good role model in the sense of like she worked very hard and she built a beautiful life for herself. She's very successful now. She's like, kind of climbed the ladder within her industry in a way that's been really interesting to see. But from a very young age, yeah, there's not enough. It was like money is a conversation. Like if we want to spend money on something, like it doesn't just happen, frivolously or carelessly. It's always very much there's thought to it. There's a reason why. There's a day that we can, spend a little extra, like all of that kind of paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. And that was something that perpetuated, well into my, I guess, like maybe early teens. And at that point was when my parents, they were a little bit older. My mom remarried, so my mom and my stepdad, and they were a little bit further along in their careers, and so there was a little bit more stability. And I started to witness that as I was also becoming, engaging in the workforce myself. But yeah, definitely some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, and I think it's I love the reflection back of thinking about it as like fiscally responsible, where some
Hmm.
people, because to me, I'm like, that's a very positive view of how you viewed those like early years of growing up versus like we lived in a house of have nots, right? Like
Yeah,
being told no over and over and over again, or um, versus like the conversation of like, yeah, we'd like to do this. And in order for us to do this, we're going to save X dollars to like be able to do that. And then you're like, okay, we have a goal. Like, let's reach the goal. And it becomes more of like, let's work together to get there. It's a very different way of like seeing money. And then when you become a teenager, or even like your late teens, early 20s, or where you're starting to work for the first time, did you notice any money habits that you kind of just naturally gravitated to, even maybe subconsciously?
totally. It's like this is like there's some really like interesting psychology happening with all this. So yeah, I mean, when I look back at that experience now, I can see it for what it was, which was like my mom was doing her best. But when I was a kid, I was demanding as hell. I was like, my first word was more. That's always like the joke in my family. Where I was always like, and I grew up actually, this is also I think quite significant. Is like I grew up and went to school in a very affluent neighborhood. So a lot of my friends had parents who were significantly older than my mom, right? Because she's only in her 20s at this point. And so they had very established careers. They had, owned their house for years. They had often dual income household, which wasn't the case for me. And so I was kind of trying to keep up with a version of, like, I guess, yeah, just like a version of lifestyle that we just didn't have access to. And so, but at the same time, like my mom was really careful and I think really and I think she sacrificed a lot, like now looking back again, now that I have the context of this, to surprise me with like the Gap hoodie that I wanted, like to actually try to say, well, it's your birthday, now you can get the scooter that your friend has. So it was really interesting because I definitely feel like I grew up with a lot of like internal comparison. And I know that something that was important to her was to try to make me not feel that way, even though still, there's certain things you can't hide. Someone comes over to your house, you can't hide what your house looks like, right? You can't hide where you got furniture from and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I think there was a lot of effort made to make me feel included and to be able to. And I always had tons of friends. I was really lucky to be very social and to have a lot of like exposure to a lot of like different people, different cultures, all of that. So, anyways, very interesting dynamics at that time. But then as I started to grow up into my teenage years and started to have access to a little bit more money because my parents had more money and because I was starting to make my own money, I was completely irresponsible. Like, did not save a dime. I was like paycheck spent like 100%, 100%. I think there was something perhaps like maybe like not necessarily intentional, but there was not a lot of conversation around like what happens when I'm on my own. Like what's going to happen when I'm not in the house of my family anymore? Like what's going to happen when like I don't have food in the fridge? Like what is going to happen when someone else isn't taking care of me? I never thought about that, not at all, until all of a sudden it was like actively happening. But I never thought about that at all. And then I was able to, or I was basically like, able to sort of receive these paychecks from I was working like, retail jobs and fast food and that kind of stuff. And it was just like, oh, I'm going to use this money that I've been paid to buy this one thing that I want, which was like a Betsy Johnson bag or like something like that. And then I would just like go back to work and wait till the next one. But there was no like, it was very much like I have money, I spend money. Like that's the point of it. It's to buy the things that I want, that my parents won't buy me or that, all my friends have or whatever. It was definitely not coming from a place of like, this is going to impact my life long term. So very interesting dynamic there, I think.
Yeah, and I would say you're probably not alone in that, oh, I got a job so I could do these extracurricular things or get these extra things.
Like a
And
bonus, yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, well, I want to go to the movies or I want to like get this thing for my friend because it's her birthday. Or like you said, like, I want that bag. I'm going to save money to go get that bag. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations with probably similar, respect to, especially in that time of your life. Like you're not thinking about adulting.
No, it feels so far. Like even just what we were just talking about, it's like the fact that I've been living in LA for 3 years, it's like that's almost all of high school, but high school was half my life. Like I'm sorry, you can't argue that with me. Like high school was exactly 50% of the age of 34. Like yeah. So it's so wild to think about that. Like things, it just felt so far away. It just felt like there was no that time where I would suddenly be like responsible for myself was like never really gonna come. I feel like I didn't fully believe it until it was happening.
Would you, if you were in that situation now, like if you could go back to whatever your parents like and say, hey, when if I could be 14 again, could you have instilled this in, or 16 again, could you have instilled, like, what would be your advice to that period of time now?
It's so interesting because it's like I don't feel like I think back on it and I think, like anyone did anything like the wrong way, but I think in a sense, I guess what I wonder is like I wonder if they were telling me and I just wasn't listening. Like I don't necessarily have the context for that, right? Like or they just weren't saying it in a way that I was understanding. You know what I mean? So I think it would have been interesting. And I do think as well, like perhaps because I was raised by somebody who had such a non-traditional college career of their own, like her entire life when she was 22 years old was keep this baby alive and like let's make something of ourselves. Whereas like me at 22, absolutely not, like not even anywhere close to that. So it's interesting because I feel like I just didn't really have the context of the, I almost maybe felt like the advice I was getting from them was like so dramatic and extreme because their situation was kind of dramatic and extreme where I was like, I'm gonna be fine. Like I'm gonna be just chilled with my
Yeah.
friends. Like don't even worry about it. Like, and a little bit of that like invincibility, I think that comes from being young. But if I was to give myself advice at 14, I think I would have just tried to find a way to say, you know, that what I really believed in myself in a really big way at that age. And I think that I don't know what happened, but in between the ages of like 14 and 24, all of that got sort of stripped away. Like I feel like I just kind of forgot that I thought I was going to be something. I forgot that I had goals. I forgot that I had dreams. And I think a lot of that just comes from like being a teenager. Like you get swept up in the drama, the gossip, the boys, like, friends, partners, whatever. And so by the end of it, I was kind of just like, who the fuck am I? And I'm broke and in a massive debt. So that was like that 10-year period. I feel like I wish that I had just had somebody kind of helping me to stay in touch with the dreams of that younger version. Like stay in touch with the like, you can make choices now that will get you to where you believe you can go much faster. And maybe to be a bit more present with me, not that I would allow it at the time, of course. I was like hiding in the basement. I was like, I'm not telling you what I'm doing on my computer. But I do think that had there been some more presence, if I was able to open up to to that in some way, I think that guidance of just like, let's stay focused on living a life that has a bit more meaning for the time being. I think that could have been valuable.
I think it's really interesting. You needed somebody on MySpace to tell you, like, hey,
100%. No, my Tumblr friends. I needed them to be like, you're gonna be famous. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I'm curious then about, like, you alluded to this, like, period of like 10 years, right? From that 14 to 24, there's a lot of growth, physically, mentally, emotionally, that happens in those formative years, right? And so
Mhm.
when you when you graduated high school, did you go on to college?
Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah, I had a really interesting experience with that as well. But basically, graduated high school, went to college in a town that was about an hour outside of my hometown, and I went for that first year. Went is in quotation marks. I was enrolled at that college. I did not
Okay.
attend class. But I was enrolled, and a bunch of my friends had gone to that same school. So I had a really interesting experience growing up because my friends, like I said, we were quite a tight knit community. And I was in French immersion, so I did French like full time in school, but the school itself wasn't a French school. So we were just like a very small group of kids within the French immersion program, and we went through everything together, like all of our classes together. So it was like the same, like let's say 15, 20 kids that were like really, really tight. And so in college, we all went to the same schools or close to the same schools. And then we just kind of like huddled together. And that was like our little safety net. So I kind of followed along in the footsteps of like what everyone else was doing just because I didn't want to be alone. And actually I applied to that school that I ended up going for that first year because the boyfriend that I had at the time was going to that school. By the time I was attending that school, we were not together. And so I think there was just a lot of like general lostness around that choice. So I didn't end up really committing to that first year of school, but then I actually ended up moving back to my hometown after a year and doing a full college program, finishing with my bachelor's degree at that time. So, and then I did
Well,
a
I'm
post
glad
grad
you
after
left the
that.
lemmings.
Yes.
You left the lemmings. Um, well, and I think there's like a lot of like you really grew up. It sounds like in that span of probably 18 months of like, wait a second, why am I here? I'm not enjoying
Yeah.
this. I don't want to be with the herd. And I think it's interesting to look at it from this point in time and look back and be like, wow, you've stepped into leadership. You've stepped into your own now, which is what you wanted to do then, but still kind of
Hmm.
like wanted to be with the herd. Didn't want to show your spot.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, it's super interesting. Like I applied, so I lived in Canada in Ontario and I had applied to a school UBC and I really wanted to go there. Like that was my dream and that would have been to move to British Columbia, which is like across the country. I wasn't ready to move across the country. I was like, 17, 18 years old at that time, but that was what I like deep down in my soul wanted and I didn't listen at all. And I also was like almost like swayed by the fact that I got into a school for an arts degree and I really wanted to be like a businesswoman. Like I was like, I'm doing a business. So I went to the school that I got in for business, even though the situation socially, as well as just like generally speaking, like probably wasn't that aligned with what I really wanted to do. But I just felt like I needed that accolade. It's just ironic because I ended up dropping out of that program and I got an arts degree anyway. And so I think about that a lot where it's like if I had just realized that that was going to be my path and chosen to do the thing that was like by far and large the scariest option, the most lonely option, I would have been following kind of what was true to me, but I ended up finding that path anyway. So I don't really look at it with regret. I just look at it with like, that's kind of funny that that happened
Yeah.
that way.
It's kind of like you pulled over for a minute and then got
Yeah.
back on the got you're like, I
Yeah.
took this off ramp and I looked around and then I was like, yeah, I'm ready to get back on the road again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the experience of like you're in school or you're in post grad.
Yeah.
And I know Canada's a little bit different with the education stuff. It's not
Yeah.
as typically not as in debt as the US. Um,
Mm.
but like when you came out of school, like where were you both from like a business, like from a career standpoint or job standpoint, as
Yeah.
well as like, because didn't you meet Frank somewhere around here?
No, I actually met him a lot later. I met him when I was 27. So at this point I would have been graduating school around like the age of 20, 21, I guess, 21, 22.
All right.
I don't even know how old I was, but yeah, so I wasn't with Frank at that time. I was with someone else. And I graduated with a ton of get debt from school because I didn't really have a major resources from a college fund perspective, but I also spent a lot of the money that I was given for college to like live, just to like have fun and party. So I ended up being quite, and that when I say given, I mean like from the bank, like the bank loan was my party fund. And so I ended up with quite a bit of debt at the end, but a pretty like, solid strategy to pay it back. I was able to communicate with my family. We do have like some more like government loans that we get from that are like a lot easier to pay back. So I had one of those as well. It's like, I pay $70 a month for 25 years or something like that. Like some crazy deal. But yeah, so anyway, so I definitely did have some debt. I was, yeah, not financially very like I guess what's the word, like literate, not very financially literate, wasn't saving, wasn't necessarily contributing to any funds of any kind. I was kind of just like, oh, now I'm like, I guess I got to figure it out. I guess I got to get a job. And I didn't really get a serious job. Like, I mean, I think, when I say serious job, I mean, like, I wasn't looking at a career at that point. I wasn't looking at like, what's going to be the rest of my life. I was just like, how do I get a good paycheck? And I ended up working in a couple of funny like jobs that I think are kind of funny, where I worked in a tanning salon. That was like a big one. And then, like, weirdly, the tanning salon, like the exact location of the tanning salon closed down. So I was out of a job because they literally like had to let me go because they went under. And then I eventually applied for a new job in that same building, like the exact same footprint, but it was actually a retail store, like a clothing store. And I actually ended up working for that company for quite some time. And that was where I first started working in marketing, which is kind of ironic, is that social media just had started. Like, it was randomly, I was just the manager. Like, that was my role, was just like manager of clothing store. And yet there was the first, like, that was the first time Instagram was invented, basically. And they were like, hey, we need someone to like be making graphics and be like posting random pictures. Like, can you do that? And I was like, yeah, 100% I can do that. Writing blogs, like stuff like that. So I ended up doing a ton of marketing work for that company. And it was while I was actually working at that store. I remember this like so vividly. I have a good friend of mine who I have known since I was quite young. She had gone back for her postgrad in public relations. She hadn't started yet, and she had applied, maybe, let's say this was maybe May. She was like, I just got into for public relations. I'm so excited, whatever. She was like, you should come with me. And it was like in our local, like, it was, up the mountain. Like, it wouldn't have been hard for me to go. I wouldn't have to relocate or anything. She's like, you should come with me. And I was like, I don't know. I'm never going back to school. That's crazy. And she was like, no, like, I think you'd be really good at it. Like, you're basically just doing all this work now. And she's like, look, here's the curriculum. And she like showed me everything that she was going to be learning. And it was all like marketing, social media, networking, community. And I was like, whoa. Because I had originally gone to marketing school. Like, business was when I had dropped out, I was thinking that I would go into marketing. But then I kind of like, again, just kind of dropped that, forgot that piece of me. And she was like, no, this is you. You should do this. And I was like, okay. And so I took out another loan and went to my postgrad. And that is what my career, like, that is what started my career for sure, is doing that. And that's when I started to actually take my future much more seriously and realize, like, okay, like, I think there's actually like a place for me in this world of impact, outside of just, I was also, doing serving jobs and all that kind of stuff, which was super fun. But yeah, it was the first time that I was like, okay, I think I could see something bigger.
Right. It was probably the first time you realized, like, oh, that's a thing. Like, the thing I'm doing is a thing.
Yeah. And I like don't hate it. Like, I think that was always my fear, was like to be kind of this idea of, I had a lot of friends who had gone to business school and kind of seen it through, and it was like the options were like accounting or economics. And I was like, like, I didn't even go to those classes. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to form a career with that. So the idea of there being like a creative side of business was really foreign to me. And actually, what's really interesting, which we didn't touch on this earlier, but I do think it plays into the whole conversation, is that my mom is an artist, but that's not her job. And it was very rare throughout my life to see her actually making money as an artist, although it did happen here and there. It was always kind of that thing that was like, she's so lucky if she can find a job in art, but she's good, like, she's going to be making her money as a nurse. Like, that's going to be her career, And so I was always kind of looking like, okay, well, what's going to be like my career? Like, if I know I'm creative and I know I like to do this art stuff, I like to do this photography stuff, but like, what's going to be my career? And I didn't know. And then suddenly I was like, wait, they can be the same thing. That's crazy.
I think that is interesting, right? It's that starving artist mindset that you're
Yeah.
seeing from afar. And I mean, people weren't saying like, oh, you can't be an artist, but
Yeah.
there was kind of this unwritten narrative happening in front of
like an insecurity with it. Like, it's if you can try, like, you can try, like, that would be cute. You could try, like, that was always kind of the vibe.
Wow. Well, good on that friend for pushing you to go to school.
I know. So grateful to her. It's super, super sweet that we did that together. It was a really beautiful experience. I know. And it is crazy. Like, it's so interesting how it's like a single relationship or a single conversation can like really change the trajectory of your life.
That is without a doubt. There's several things that just popped into my head of my own life that I was like, yes, from a single conversation. Because of a conversation outside of an economics class, I'm now married to my husband of 25 years. So,
right? I love that. Wait, tell the story.
My husband and I met in college. I played soccer with these two guys who had a course with him the semester before, and we were all in this corporate economics class, and we were gathered outside the first lecture, kind of just chatting about what did we think of the professor, blah, blah, blah. What are we going to do the homework? Oh, let's all go for pizza, and we'll break up the questions. And Jameson, my now husband, walked out. And the two guys were like, Jameson, you should come with us. We're going to go for pizza and do this. And he sat down next to me. And that's how we met.
I'm obsessed
And
with that.
like 6 months later, he proposed. I said yes. And 2.5 years after that, we got married. So,
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful tale. And I love that pizza was the catalyst. I'm a big
oh,
fan.
yeah.
It sounds like you took school really seriously. Like you are like the people that I was looking at in school being like, they're aliens.
I mean, I would just go at Santa Barbara. So there was a lot of fun to be had, even when you were at class. And yeah,
I love that.
I did a lot of fun things, but I needed a major to go with my minor. I went for my minor,
Mm.
not the major. And
Okay, fair.
yeah. So I went for sport management. I got a degree in economics.
Very cool. I mean, you have some really, really, I mean, in Southern California especially, but like just so many cool options for like what you can actually go to school for. You know what I mean? Like that would be something that in Canada you'd likely like travel for that because like we didn't have as many of those kind of like entertainment opportunities and things like that.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things why like people look at so many different schools is like, what is the you can get an emphasis in this thing, or you could do,
Enough
this
just
could be your specialty. Right. So like for instance, like in economics, you could get an emphasis in accounting. You could get an emphasis in, I think it was like business analyst.
hmm
Like in the communications department, you could get an emphasis in different things. And
Yeah.
so I remember looking at the course curriculum and being like, well, I have to take these economic classes anyway for my minor. Well, what does it look like to do the major? Like there's only a few more classes I got to take to get the major. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of how I picked like what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, well, the business school that I did go to, main reason why I picked that school was A, because they didn't require me to have very high math marks to get in, and B, because of the boy that went there, and then C, because they had fashion communication, and that was very interesting to me at the time. I was like, oh, I could go into like be a magazine editor vibe. Like that's where that was like really speaking to me. It felt very exciting. And it's funny, something about this conversation is just making me think about how in the current like landscape of online business and online entrepreneurs who I work with, day in, day out, is this desire to have this like title, right? It's this desire to like define ourselves by something. And when we were in at that season of life of applying to colleges, like that's what we were looking for, right? We wanted to be, I am a fashion communications major. I am a like, you know what I mean? Like it's like that was the only like identity that we could create for ourselves outside of the one that was like my last name, And so I think it's quite interesting to think about how that like plays out. And now it's like we get to sort of define and create those things, but still we're looking around and thinking like, oh, well, they call themselves a business strategist. That sounds sexy. Maybe I'm a business strategist, like it's funny the way that we just fall into those patterns of like just such deep desire to self-identify in some way. Uh-huh. Well, it's like the coach thing, right? People are like, I'm not a coach. I do coaching, but I am not a coach. Like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, it's a soul searching thing. And I think we have to like shed a lot of the associations that we have with certain identities or even certain words, and it can be like a really long and enduring process. And like you go back and forth. Like I've definitely kind of gone up and down through that lens of like, sometimes just picking like, I'm a content coach because that's easier. But then I'm like, that doesn't speak to my expertise. It doesn't really do anything for what my approach is. So I need to like almost like shed the laziness of that in a sense. And I'm just saying for me, it's lazy. I think that's, for some people, it's very accurate and it feels like a great way to identify yourself. But yeah, I think it's such an interesting process. I'm very like fascinated by that conversation of like the way that our title can both make us feel very free because we're able to say, this is who I am and I can express myself very well, and can make us feel very trapped where we're like, I'm stuck now in a box that I built because of this title that I'm holding on so tightly to, right?
And this gets us back to money, right? And how we think about money and how that same box and those same identities can trap us in this kind of certain money mindset. And I'm really curious what changed the tide for you, right? So you were someone who was kind of paying very little attention of what's coming in and what's going out to some regard, right? Having a lot of fun in the process.
Thriving.
Without a doubt. But at some point, like, what was that revelation? What was that awakening? What was that change of conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it really did come down to so this is now I'm 27 years old. I've been working. I did actually like pursue that degree. I had a job, but it was like I was only able to get part-time work in the actual career that I wanted. So I was also working, a couple of other like I mean, I'll give the full landscape, but basically I got a PR, I got my PR undergrad or sorry, postgrad, and then I got a job working communications and marketing for like a local nonprofit. And so they were able to give me, I think, I don't know, 25 hours a week or something like that. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be needing to do something else on the side. I loved the gym at the time. I was really into fitness. So I became a personal trainer. And I was then kind of like, because I can't not be like fucking bossy everywhere that I go, I was then became the manager of that. And so I was running the gym. I was the director of the gym. So then I was taking on a lot of marketing, communications, all the community management stuff. And that was actually really interestingly like quite similar in skill set to like what I'm now doing, which is funny because that was like not my goal. I was like, I thought I was just going to be like helping people work out. But I ended up becoming the director of the studio. And so that's where I met Frank. And so when I met Frank, my husband, we were both working. He was working also within a local business, doing a lot of marketing work, social media, all that stuff. At that point, it was just like whoever was like whoever's like in the office is doing all that shit, you know? But we both had backgrounds that supported it. Like I had done PR, he had done photojournalism as well as editing. And so we kind of just like, both were working in our independent careers, which had a lot of crossover just because it was a local community. And we started thinking about, I started getting asked actually to do more like marketing work just randomly from people like my gym clients at the gym, things like that. Like, can you help me with my newsletter? Can you help me design this poster, whatever? And I was like, yeah, for sure. Cause I was already doing that. And then Frank basically started helping me because I randomly was like, hey, I don't know how to design this website, but I said I was going to do it. Can you help me? Like you're tech guy, like let's do this. And so it just sort of snowballed from there. And so at that point, we're starting our own business. We have moved in together after, being together for a couple of months. And it was just this moment of like, neither of us really felt like we could go anywhere else from where we were at in our careers. Me personally, where I was at was like, it was just like, it wasn't, there was no opportunity for growth and it was becoming a little bit toxic in a lot of ways as well, just based on some of the interpersonal relationships and things like that. And so and he really loved his job, but at the same time, it was just like small business, didn't really know kind of where the growth was going. We wanted more autonomy. We wanted to be able to travel. We wanted to be in control of our lives. And I think basically what we realized is like, what I realized is I can't be in control of my life if I have no money. I can't be in control of my life if I'm living in overdraft permanently. And Frank also was quite a few years older than me. And he is just generally, I think, he was a further along in his life. He had been previously married, he had owned a home, like he was a bit more established in the traditional senses. And so he was like, let's get you up to fucking zero, like let's just get you up to like being just a like legitimized human being at least. And so once we got to that baseline, I felt like, okay, I can start fresh. Like I still had a lot of debt, but I had like consolidated it and I like was more in control of where the money was coming from. I kind of like was looking at my finances more. And then at that point when we started the business, we started to share finances. And so there just was like a lot more conversation around it. And there also just felt like there was a lot more, like, for lack of a better word, like purpose. Like I felt like, okay, I am making money so that I can build a life that I really like because I'm not like a kid anymore. Like I want to actually have a future that I can like sink my teeth into. And I want this vision that I've had for myself forever to actually be like a real thing that I can say I did it or I'm doing it. And so I had a ton of drive. I had a ton of ambition. I always have been very much like, randomly, you should go to this program. And I'm like, okay. And I just like sign up that day. Like I can do that. I can take those leaps, but I never really thought about like, what is the foundation that I'm building to catch me whenever I do this for the rest of my life? Like I'm always going to be this very spontaneous, like risk driven person, but like those risks can be digging me a hole or they can be creating opportunities. And so I definitely flipped that switch of just like, I want to build a life that I don't have to feel afraid to open my bank account or I don't have to feel held back because I just don't have enough to do what I want to do. And so that's when it all really began. And then we started building our business from there.
Wow. So much to dig into. But one, like things that I want to point out, one is I love the money talk between the couple, right? Because I mean, if there's any advice I give to friends who are like getting into a more serious relationship with a partner is I'm like, have you talked about money? Have you been really honest about money? Like open the closet, let them see all the skeletons or let them see all the pretty organized stuff that you have. Like, it's going to be one or the other. It's usually not somewhere in between. And I'm thinking of a very particular friend right now who they got married. She was like pregnant at their wedding. They had a kid. And then I'm like, have you talked about money? And she's like, well, no, I don't know, but I really want to buy a house. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Have you shared your money stuff with him? And vice versa. No, no. And then like, 2 years down the road, like they can't have the conversation because one starts to talk about it, the other one shuts the other one down. They don't want to hear about it. And then causes all this issue. And I'm like, do you feel like if you would have had that conversation, like prior to saying yes to marriage, that maybe it'd be a little bit easier? And so I just think like
Totally.
having that clarity and being able to say like, hey, I have all this debt and I really don't know a thing to do about money. But that's me coming here, And then, I mean, and he's had all this previous experience and he could say, well, here's what worked for me. And you being open to that,
Yeah.
I think is awesome. And then you guys have been really transparent about it on your podcast. What I find interesting is taking the ideas and dreams of like the kid, right? Like your teenage self, your young self, and bringing it into kind of like adult mode where you're like, hey, like I drew all these really pretty pictures and now I actually need to figure out like, how do I make the unicorn fly? Right? Like, how do I invent that? Because that's going to cost money. Right. And then it's like, oh, but I don't have that. So how do I attain them?
Yeah. 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 And I think it's really interesting because even just like that dynamic, like Frank and I very much work in that way where I'm very much like, okay, here's the thing that I want to do. And he's like, okay, here's how we can do it. Like he always knows that there's like a way. Like, and it's like, but a lot of the time, um, I think that as that very like dreamer kind of archetype that I always was beforehand, there was nobody to tell me. And actually, when you think back of like what would I wanted my 14-year-old self to know, it would have been like, if you want to do that, here's the path. Like, here are the steps that you can take to make that happen. And that's the thing that Frank, I think, has contributed so beautifully into our dynamic is like, he's like, yeah, no, that's possible. Like, all of these things, like, even moving to LA is such a great example, right? It's like, I wanted to move to California since I could like remember. And but yet I never did a single thing to make that happen because I really just in my mind it was like, yeah, that's so hard. Like that doesn't just like that is gonna have to like fall into my lap in some way, right? But as soon as I actually said to Frank, yeah, I'd like to move to California, he's like, okay, let's get a lawyer. Like, and I was like, what?
You're
Like
like, why
there are
was that
people
your
whose
first thought?
I'm like, there are people whose job it is to like make this possible for me, And I think a lot of that comes from like fear. Like when I think of like my younger self, I was very afraid to look for the answers because I was very afraid to find them out, which I think is also similar to the money thing, right? Is like I was scared to look at my bank account because I knew it was bad, or I was scared to say, I want this dream. Like, for example, I was afraid to apply to school in the States because I was afraid to face the fact that we didn't have money for it. I was afraid to sort of like actually like chase these sort of bigger visions because of this idea of like, well, what if the answer is no? And that really like scared me growing up, maybe because I heard a lot and that being because of, my mom making smart decisions as a as a youth of her own, but I didn't receive it that way always. And so interestingly, like I think Frank was this really cool unlock for me of just showing me like, yeah, like there's always a way. It's just like we have to just look for it. It just takes a little bit of effort, takes a little bit of elbow grease, but like we're gonna find it. And since then we always have. So
So let's talk about the money pie,
mhm.
right? So we talked about how you guys have this business or you first ran a business together and now you've kind of morphed it into a non-agency, right? It's more
Yep.
the two of you, but you have your fingers in a lot of pies, a lot of money pies.
I love that.
And so I want to talk about that expansive growth, right? This expansive mindset now that you've shifted into. One is like, in, oh my gosh, which one is it? It's in Leisure Ethic, I think, where you
Mhm.
have you talk about your monthly spending guide, right? And like
Yeah.
this, and can't remember if it's in that video or in maybe something you posted online because I see you everywhere. Um, but this idea of when you used to not track like your monthly spending, and then you
Yeah.
would kind of I'll say like withhold the pleasure of like getting the coffee or getting the shirt or the loaf of bread or whatever. And then you're like, but then I would just kind of go wild. And now that
Yes.
you're conscious of it, you actually spend less, which I find really interesting. So there's a
Yes.
two-parter here. One is kind of this expansive idea of having various things that you're involved in,
Hmm.
um, and how you got to be brave enough to like make an investment in a wine shop, for instance.
Hmm.
Um, and then also just that conscious notion of like looking at the bank account and no.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so from that like kind of expansive perspective, I think what's really interesting is like one thing that very much kind of comes down to is like another reason why like money is important to us, or like having an abundance of money is important to us, is because we want to be able to make decisions that kind of are like a little bit crazy and a little bit like, investing in the wine shop, for example, is like that wasn't something that we were like, oh, this is going to be the ticket to riches. It was just more so like this is like a cause and a business that we really believe in and we want to be a part of it. And that makes us feel so connected to the LA community. And it makes us like give this opportunity to like experience a dynamic in a business that we haven't got to experience yet. Like we've gotten to learn so much from it. So it's like, yes, there was a buy-in, of course. And eventually that does mean that there could be a payout at some point, but that the dynamic, like the reason for doing it doesn't have anything to do with that. And we've always wanted to have the opportunity to make those choices. And that same goes for, being able to take on like an apartment in Mexico City, for example, is like, we wanted to be able to just say like, yeah, we have an apartment in Mexico City and we rent that apartment out and our friends are able to stay there. And, we're able to share it in this like really beautiful kind of community driven way. Like that's a really exciting plot line for us. And we could only do that if we weren't scared to add on an extra monthly expense of rent to that apartment. Like, yes, it does pay for itself for the most part, but we have to be willing to take on the risk of what if it doesn't. And so a lot of times in terms of like the way that we've invested, like our current business that I like lead through the lens of the online leadership stuff is funding all of these other things. And those other things, it almost like takes the pressure off of those things to be these like massive investments that have these massive returns, and for them to be more almost like these really beautiful like opportunities to enrich our lifestyle in a sense, while at the same time still creating opportunities that are maybe more long term. Like we can see that return in the future, but there's no pressure for it to be bringing in bank every month for us now. So I don't know if that really answers that question, but just sort of shows like maybe why and how we made some of those decisions or how they're like playing out currently. Is there anything else you wanted to dig into on that front?
No, I find that really interesting. It's kind of like it's a long-term view, but one also where you're like, I want to invest in this because it means something to me. It doesn't necessarily have to have a return, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's more in like the investments. Like I have this money, I care about this cause, I have this idea, right? And
Yes.
it's like an experiment. I want to invest in that.
Yeah.
Versus like the business, the business is a different mindset because it's like, well, that has to generate money in order to cover our livelihood.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, definitely really different in terms of like how we look at our revenue. Like we actually, and then, we don't really look at those pieces as like part of our monthly revenue. Like when we're actually creating our budget, like we're looking at the business just like as it stands as O Sierra, not the rentals, not the wine shop, not even like I do retreats. Like I have a business partner in a retreat company that we do together, which is like currently we kind of just run it through our own businesses, but it has its own like brand. And that's been like a really, really beautiful sort of add-on and another endeavor that has actually been very profitable, but also just like really enriching. And again, it's like to have the freedom to take a week off and go and do that and be able to be, be in collaboration with somebody and to build it without the pressure was such a beautiful gift. And like, we've been really fortunate that has like built in the direction that it has built, but that wasn't the point the first time. It was just like, I want to host a retreat. You want to host a retreat? Let's see how that goes, and then sort of being able to, again, sort of take that risk, but then the return does come alongside that.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So let's talk about the monthly spend guide.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
So this shift between not looking at the bank account.
Yeah.
And now consciously thinking about it and how that has been actually enriching.
Yes. And actually has been relatively new, which I think is an important piece of the puzzle too. It's like, I'm talking about money as if like, oh yeah, like we're so laissez-faire with it. We have this like whole thing down, but it's like, even still, Frank and I both, we have that habit of like, we like to live large. Like we're very much like, you can't take it with you mindset. We don't have kids. We're not planning on having kids. And so we don't really think about like legacy building as much as I think some people do, nor do we think about like, there's no one at risk except for the two of us. And so in some ways, I think it was like, we were living a little bit like too like liberally for a while there, because it was just sort of like and I think also like speaking about our agency, like we did have the experience of going into really big debt within that agency, and we explore that at length in that debt episode of the podcast that you were talking about. But after that, then seeing our business rise and flourish again in this new model, it was like kind of exciting to have a little bit a plenty, let's say, right? Like to be able to sort of play with that from a place of not feeling so hinged all the time. And so we let it flow. But we realized that we were starting to have a lot of anxiety over our finances because it was feeling a little bit like we weren't paying attention. And it wasn't that we were necessarily putting ourselves at risk, but it could have gotten to that place, right? Because I think when you're not paying attention, anything can happen. And so it was actually like after last summer, I don't remember exactly, but I think we had been traveling quite a bit. And I think we had been very much in that mindset of like, we're just having fun. It's the summer, whatever. And then we were like, okay, we got to like get it. We got to like change the way we feel about the conversations that we're having about money. This is actually why it came up. This is interesting. I think that you'll find this interesting is that we were noticing that we were arguing more about money and we were feeling a lot of tension around money. And that was coming from the fact that now I take on the role of being the breadwinner. So my job is to and run this business and make sure that it makes money. And Frame kind of plays with a lot of those other things. Like he's the one who works in the wine shop. He manages the Airbnbs. But the money that comes in that funds all of that stuff is the business that I'm leading. And so what we were noticing is that, he is very financially motivated. He's very in the books. He's always paying attention to the books. He knows what money comes in. He knows what money comes out. And so he would sometimes be feeling a little bit like, well, what's the next launch plan? Like, we're a little low, like, what's going on? And I'd be like, stop pressuring me. Like, don't, like, you're stressing me out. Like, I can't create in these circumstances, like being so dramatic. And we realized like it's just a lack of communication. Like I need to talk to him about my launch plans because I always know the money's coming. I always have a plan. There's always a strategy and a structure, but I just have to communicate that to him. And then likewise, we need to be having daily conversations about how are we spending this money? Do we have a budget? Do we know that we're going to meet that budget, even if maybe that sale doesn't go the way that we want it to go or whatever? Like to be able to create a little bit more flexibility so that I don't feel pressure to always be making more. And he doesn't feel like we need more because it's like just leaving the bank account, right? So it was really an interesting conversation that led to it. But basically what we decided was like, let's actually see, like, let's just set this because we had a budget. We've always had a budget. We just weren't like paying attention to it necessarily. We were just kind of like hoping we met it. And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. So we were like, let's actually like play with this and make it like a real dedicated thing. And so we created this budget. First we went on like a 2-week like no spend. We were just like, we just need to like stop for a minute and just like be more conscious of like, when do we want to spend money? Why are we spending money? Where's it coming from? And then we implemented this budgeting process. And so the way that we do it together is I think it's quite cute. We have a shared note, like just a shared note in our phone. And so it's basically it's categorized by like different types of spending. So we have like our shared spending, which is for a week, like a number of dollars that we spend in a week. And that's like between both of us doing whatever we want. So that would be like drinks, food, and I mean food like eating out, clothes, like anything that we just feel like purely just like pleasure spending. And then we have a grocery budget. We have like unexpected expenses. We have toiletries. We have dog food, like those things that are kind of more consistent. And then we just update it when we spend. So if I go for coffee, $5, I put it in the tracker. If I buy myself a t-shirt, the $30, I put it in the tracker, and vice versa for him. And we don't have it like, he gets half, I get half. It's just like once we reach the limit, we reach the limit. And we have those kind of conversations where, if he's like, I want to buy a new pair of jeans. It's like, okay, great. Like, put it in the tracker, I won't buy my new pair of jeans this week, whatever. We also do have individual savings. So if we want to make, bigger purchases outside of that, we can pick and choose if we want to do that, but it's not required by any means. Like if he wants to buy something for himself and it goes in our shared spending, like that's no problem, and vice versa. And so we just track it on a weekly basis. And I've noticed, like you said, that I no longer make these big, almost like impulsive, very like nervous system upsetting purchases or sprees, let's call them. But instead, I spend money consistently every day on things that actually enrich my life, and I don't go over budget. And it's very interesting. And I think so much more about whether or not I want a thing. Like I go to the thrift shop all the time, and I feel like it can be so easy to be like, this $15 shirt is so cute. Oh my God, should I get it? And now it's never about the price of the thing, because usually it will fit in the budget regardless, but it's more so like, do I really want this thing? What is this thing going to add to my life? Can I wait? Can I find a better version of it? Would I rather invest, double the price in something that'll last me longer? Like I just feel like I have to write it down in this sheet. So I'm going to think a little bit about what it means to me. And it's made a huge difference. But like you said, I'm actually probably spending money more often, but I'm spending less money.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating. But I love that you're doing it, right? Because one, we are so inundated with like buy all the time. Like you pick up your phone and there's an ad in your face, right? Or you're like, oh my God, that's a really cute. Now, I'm not into makeup. For those that know me, know that this is going to sound so weird, but like, oh, that's a cute lip gloss, or right? Like for me, it's like, oh, that's such a cute little craft thing. Should I buy that? Like, I kind of want that thing. Or it's a photography thing. Like, oh, Peak Design just came out with that new bag. Like I kind of need that new bag. Right. But the act of writing it down, one is like, you're like, oh, I'm conscious that I bought that $5 latte.
Yeah.
And then it's also a matter of, to your point of like the want, right? It's identifying the want and then being like, well, maybe next, if I come in here on Friday when they usually put new stuff out, there might be something new that I like better. And a friend of mine's teenage daughter, like she basically told her, like, you can't just keep like hitting buy on your phone for everything. So what she came up with is if she sees it on TikTok or she sees it on Instagram, she has a notes app. She takes the link, she puts it in the notes app, and she's like, in 72 hours, if I'm still
Yep.
thinking about it, then I'm allowed to like go get it within like the budget and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, then you don't get that immediate like dopamine hit. And then it's like buyer's remorse.
Yes. Well, it's super interesting. So I exactly the same way because I am so online. I'm always seeing things that I love. And I do actually in that chart that you were talking about in the leisure ethic, the spending tracker section, there is like a to buy list. And so I put things that I see in that buy list. I'll tell you right now, there are probably 20 things in that list that have been sitting there for 6 months. Like clearly it wasn't that urgent. Maybe I'll never buy them, but it's like the goal for me and the way that I think about it, especially because we do have this shared spending and we like to go out on the weekends. We like to, kind of enjoy ourselves experience wise, etc. And so often what I'll do is I'll sort of check on Sunday and Sundays when it resets and I'll say, okay, there's extra $100 in here we didn't spend. Is there anything on this list that I genuinely want to buy? Usually the answer is no. And so it's very funny because it's like we think that, and it also makes you feel like it's like the I think the actual like dopamine hit that we're going for is this idea of like I can have that thing, and it's like by saying I'm gonna buy it later, it's like the same. Like you still get the same satisfaction because you're like, yeah, I'll buy this later. Don't worry, I got you. Like you're gonna treat yourself later, but you never actually have to do it. Like you never have to follow through because usually by the time you're like, I actually don't want this that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No,
so
I don't need it.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think to kind of close out the conversation, I'm conscious of time, is what does the future look like? Right. So how are you guys future saving? And you mentioned,
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat of not having kids. And, there's that kind of sense of legacy and things like that. But there also is a time where, you might want to, I don't know, not work so hard on Osierra, or maybe you're going to pivot into the next iteration. Who knows what you're going to do? But I mean, is there a savings plan? Do you guys think about future, the future for you guys? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, we've actually started taking that much more seriously. And one big unlock for that was this idea and this kind of conversation, like I mentioned, around pressure, to be sort of in that constant sales cycle of like every month the sales must come in. That requires action from me, and not to look at it through the lens of like, what if something bad happens to me, but also just like, what if I just want to chill for a minute? And what we realized, like what we had thought originally, and I wonder if other business owners will find this helpful, because I always sort of thought like I need to basically legacy proof my business model. Like I need to make it so that I'm making more passive revenue or blah, 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 all this shit. I don't like that. Like, I don't want to do that. That's not how I sell. That's not how I build. Like personally, just for me, it doesn't work. And so I was like, okay, wait, if all I want is security, if all I want is stability, is this really the only way I can get it? And all of a sudden we were like, no, we can save money. Like that can be the thing. And so what we realized, we actually plot crazy idea. We actually realized like, okay, let's pick a number. And so I said, I want 6 months of our current like revenue, like our monthly revenue. I want that in a bank somewhere. Like that is the goal. It's just to have that money sitting there so that no matter what happens, if I need 6 months off work, I can do that, or one here and there, or 2 weeks here and there, like just to alleviate that pressure. So that's been like a new way of thinking about it, which has helped us to really feel excited and inspired to do so. And so we've done that. So we did have like lump sum cash savings from selling our property that we had in Mexico originally. And then we also bought a piece of land in Joshua Tree that we then sold and did make a profit off of that. So we had some cash. And so we started investing that cash. So we put it in stocks, which is going great. But it's a long game. And so we did invest that, and that's been really like cool to sort of see that potential for growth. And then also we have a savings plan to continue to be putting savings into that. And that's more of like that long-term, like kind of nest egg that we're building. And then we have we have more of like a casual sort of savings plan, which is just like a bit of money from each paycheck that just goes into our individual like savings accounts, which is intended, like I said, for buying, a watch or something like that. Something that's a little bit more like, fun, more immediate. Like we don't have to like wait to cash it out. And then we do also own another property. So that property that we own in Canada is our cottage, and that we do see as like we're gonna own that forever, not forever, ever maybe, but like we plan on holding onto it for a long time. We look at it as a very good investment. We put money into building, like into renovating it and adding value to it. And so that's something that we'll kind of hold as an asset, which we may or may not use to purchase other assets in the future, but we don't really have plans for that. Like we're pretty happy with that kind of being our only that's the starting point, I guess. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're just really focusing on building up that like kind of specific dollar amount that feels like security and safety for the business as it stands now. And then let's sort of see what more opportunities that can afford us. And Frank right now doesn't work traditionally, like he's not bringing in cash with his endeavors at the moment. But he has ideas. He has business ideas. He has things that he wants to pursue. And so it would be really exciting to be able to fund those things. It'd be really exciting to see maybe a shift in the way that, revenue comes through within our relationship as well. But there's no again, no pressure on that. It's just like, let's see what happens. So that's where we're at savings wise and future planning wise, I suppose.
All right. Well, do you have any resources that you have learned from that you were like, oh, this is so good, like I think other people should check them out?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So Caitlin, who I do the retreats with, she has a really beautiful course that's called Open to Overflow. And it's more on like the money mindset. And it's really around like building a lot of neutrality around money, which I feel like is the key to financial success. Like it's not so much about like how do you make more money or whatever, but it's like, can I hold this? Like, can I look at this? Can I get like my hands in this and it not feel like a fear response, So I definitely recommend that. I love her approach to it. And, other than that, I think that I don't have a ton of great resources. I've been recommended a lot of great money resources and I haven't really engaged with them. I'm not going to lie. So I'm a very much like fuck around and find out kind of person. Like I feel like a lot of I learned through my own mistakes, as you can tell. But I definitely do love to look more through like the mindset lens of money. So I'm always interested in reading and in consuming things that are within that realm. But I don't have any great books or anything like that in a tangible sense.
All right. Well, for those that don't know, Xanthia and Frank have a really amazing podcast called I Love You to the Core. And they have 2 money podcasts now, 2 episodes where you guys really dive into money. So I will link those in the show notes. And you should definitely check them out. And you can hear more about their debt story and more about just like you guys banter. In the first episode, you banter a lot about money and this and what are we going to do and that. And it's very heartwarming, actually. It's very sweet.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, I definitely want to bring more of these conversations up too. So if you listen to this and you have questions for me, please send me a DM anytime. I'm like I'm very accessible on Instagram. So if you ever want to send me a message and ask me a question, or you want us to do an episode on something, or for us to have another conversation on something, I think I'd be so open to hearing that.
Yay. Thank you for being here. This has been so fun. I have a lot more questions, but I will tame them for now and we will stoke the fire again later. But we've finished our s'mores. We're going to put out that fire and I'm going to catch you in your DMs. Some shifts don't happen in a Google Doc or a Zoom call. They happen in person, over coffee, through conversation, or in the quiet morning during a sketching session at the museum. That's what Creative Camp London is all about. It's a 4-day experience this fall, September 28th to October 2nd, for creative entrepreneurs ready to reconnect to their work, to their ideas, and to one another. Join the waitlist by July 20th to get $400 off, a bonus coaching session with me, and early access to just one of the 12 spots. Jump over the show notes to grab the link to get on the waitlist today. That's a wrap on this episode of Creative Campfire. Thanks for pulling up a chair and sitting with us. If you're loving these convos, share the podcast with a friend. The more people around the fire, the better the vibe. If you have thoughts, stories, or know someone we should interview, please tag us over at creativecamp.pro or drop into our DMs on Instagram. We've got to put the fire out for now, but we'll stoke it again real soon.